Predator, a genre-bending cult classic that brought us extraterrestrial hunters and the guerrilla camp raid, one of the most iconic scenes from the golden age of action cinema. This battle pits Dutch Schaefer's seemingly indestructible 7-man mercenary team against an army of Soviet-backed rebels deep in the jungles of Central America. But what if we had to execute this operation with a real-world unit and accurate military doctrine? How would we realistically do it? The goal of this video is to answer that question by analysing the planning, tactics, and assets required to successfully achieve such a mission. If strategic planning isn't your cup of tea, you can skip ahead using the timestamps on screen. Our video structure is based on a modified version of the military appreciation process. First, we assess the enemy capabilities, followed by understanding the friendly units involved and the terrain where the mission takes place. This lets us develop a workable battle plan before executing the mission through simulation. Before starting, it's worth discussing why the absurdity of this scene matters from a narrative sense. Like many action films of the time, the equipment, tactics, and gunplay favours style over realism. Our heroes are shown free roaming around the guerrilla camp, mowing down hordes of enemies while cheerfully wisecracking and enduring little more than minor injuries in return.
I ain't got time to bleed.
But Predator does this for a specific storytelling purpose, to intentionally portray Arnold's team as stereotypical turbo-chad super soldiers. By doing so, our expectations are subverted later in the film when our intergalactic antagonist begins stalking and butchering these elite operators with ease.
Anytime.
Part 1. Enemy force analysis. Given their purpose is to serve as cannon fodder for our muscle-bound heroes, little information is provided on the guerrilla faction from the film. With that being said, we can fill in the gaps with planning assumptions based on a real-world geopolitical situation at the time. Here's what we know for certain. The enemy are a non-state guerrilla force, operating outside the control or scope of the nation's interests. In contrast, the government proper is itself supported by US intelligence and military agencies. As a militia group, they lack the assets of a formal army, such as heavy weapons, body armor, and tanks. Tanks, you say?
Listen here and listen good. Stop scrolling and start rolling in a tank, because this video is sponsored by World of Tanks, and World of Tanks is blowing the roof off with an offer that's hotter than a flamethrower in a foxhole. The best of all, it's free to play. That's right, free. F-R-E-E. Free. All you need is a PC, an internet connection, and a desire to destroy everything in your path. With over 800 tanks to choose from, you're certain to find something that tickles your fancy. There's big tanks, small tanks, fast tanks, slow tanks, thick tanks, tanks with big guns, tanks with lots of guns, tanks that look like turtles, and even
The can opener.
And right now, I've got a special offer just for you. If you're a new player, click the link in the description and use the invite code COMBAT, and you'll get the Cromwell B, a Tier 6 British behemoth, 250,000 credits, 7 days premium, plus 3 premium tanks to rent for 10 battles each, Tiger 131, T-78, and a Type 64. And if you've been AWOL for over 30 days, not to worry, you can still score wicked loot. Use the same code and get 3 days premium, an exclusive checkered camo skin, and best of all, a 7-day rental of the Australian Centurion Mark V.
So click the link in the description, punch in combat, grab your freebies, and join the 100 million players worldwide experience of my World of Tanks as the King of Armored Chaos. Only available for a limited time, so don't hesitate. Jump online and treat yourself now.
Back to the video. Explicitly referred to in the film as Russian military advisors, the group is backed by Soviet instructors and equipment. These personnel are field-embedded in an advise, assist, and accompany capacity. Their Soviet backing implies a communist orientation, which is consistent with the ideology of similar anti-government forces of the 80s. Their tactics of ambushing and hostage-taking are also typical of revolutionary groups from the region. While not mentioned by name, the original film was set in the fictional nation of Valverde, a placeholder banana republic used by Hollywood to not ruffle diplomatic feathers. However, years later, with the release of Predators, the character Isabel states that Guatemala, not Valverde, was the location for the events of the first film. With this broad picture, we can infer that the guerrillas in the film are loosely based on the URNG, the Unidad Revolucionaria Nacional Guatemalteca, a real-world socialist guerrilla movement from the era. Although the Central Americas were ripe with more radical paramilitary groups, the URNG shall provide the skeleton for this analysis, given their Guatemalan roots. Although unconventional, the group likely still has a centralized structure, with a loose chain of command external to the camp. The real-world commander of the URNG was Rolando Moran, who co-founded and led the group during the 1980s. He coordinated the URNG's 4 factions from bases in Guatemala and later from exile in Mexico City, managing the broader militant and later political campaign against the Guatemalan government. No key leader is apparent in the film. However, we could assume the guerrillas shown attempting to flee in the helicopter hold positions of authority. In reality, the camp commandant would be based on a real-world figure like Cesar Montes, who was a senior leader of the armed wing of the faction. Having been trained in both Cuba and North Vietnam, Cesar was involved in numerous engagements against Guatemalan government forces. In our example, the camp commander is responsible for planning offensive operations and coordinating security routines. An unnamed Soviet military advisor is present in the film and is shown torturing and executing American captives. The Soviet advisor to the URNG is responsible for training the rebels' basic soldier skills, providing weapons and equipment, and amplifying the anti-government communist agenda of the Soviets in the region. When conducting intelligence preparation of the battlefield, or IPB, we can use the planning template Salute Him to concisely evaluate the enemy picture. Using Salute Him helps assess enemy capabilities, predict their actions, and develop sound courses of action for the tactical plan. As a non-conventional force, the guerrillas likely have minimal formality to their groupings. However, based on what is shown in the film and comparisons to the URNG, we can assess the camp contains between 40 to 50 fighters. They have been conducting limited offensive operations against government and US forces, including recently downing a US surveillance helicopter with anti-air missiles. In doing so, they demonstrated ruthlessness to their cause, as the American pilots were executed on site. They project from the camp in dismounted foot patrols, up to 12 men in strength, likely to conduct harassing operations and to gather intelligence on government forces. Their campsite is based in a remote valley in the Guatemalan highlands. The camp itself is situated in thick jungle terrain and is adjacent to a flowing river system. This position is protected by a layered perimeter including roving patrols, sentries, and bunker hardpoints. As the paramilitary wing of the URNG, the guerrillas are a composite force based on multiple unified factions. Within the camp, they likely split into smaller task-driven cells, built around a team leader and weapon specialists. They are dressed in a mix of civilian and military attire, with common uniforms being jungle greens, tiger stripe, and lizard camouflage patterns. Their headdress is a mix of red headbands, berets, kepi-type caps, and straw hats. The Russian advisor is dressed similarly to the local Guatemalans. Speculating on the rebels' routines, they likely maintain a 24-hour guard roster, manning bunkers, sentries, and patrols. These positions likely rotate every 2 to 4 hours, with the sentries and roving patrols conducted by daylight only. Their rest duration would therefore depend on the time of day and available personnel. Having been supplied by the Soviets, they possess a light but capable armament befitting an insurgent force. More details on this later. The rebels likely eat prepared meals twice daily in the dining shack, around 0900 for breakfast and 1800 hours for dinner. Daily routines such as weapons maintenance and classes from the Russian advisor likely commence mid-morning and conclude mid-afternoon. The camp likely has a scheduled rest period around noon, culturally typical to rural Latin America to avoid the midday heat and minimize fatigue. Dialogue from Dylan indicates that they are preparing for a major offensive operation against a neighboring US-backed country. This suggests they are in a period of tactical reset and accruing resources and personnel for their upcoming mission. They would likely attempt to use the American hostages for political leverage or to extract information. Their morale would be assessed as high, given their recent success in downing a CIA helicopter and capturing American hostages. Additionally, their upcoming large-scale operation also indicates strategic cohesion and faith in their cause. Note that while they have previously shot down US airframes and taken hostages, there is no indication they had prior combat experience against American personnel, as the US operations to this point have been focused on CIA-driven intelligence collection in support of the Guatemalan government, as opposed to kinetic action, assets, and weapons. The guerrillas are equipped with an array of small arms, apt for a Soviet-backed force operating in a rural environment. While they lack support weapons such as heavy machine guns and mortars, carrying only light and squad automatic weapons maximizes their mobility in the jungle environment. The primary weapon for all fighters, the AKM, is a Soviet assault rifle chambered in 7.62 by 39. Durable, reliable, and easy to learn, it is fitted with a 30-round magazine and capable of firing 600 rounds per minute. As the AKMs were likely supplied as new from the Russian advisors, their fleet would be in good condition and less susceptible to wear and tear from the austere jungle environment. A Finnish version of the RPK light machine gun, the Valmet M78, is the primary light support weapon for the guerrilla squad. Firing 7.62 by 39 from an extended 40-round magazine, it is a highly maneuverable support weapon that allows a fighter to provide covering fire while retaining dismounted mobility. The Valmet is used at static defensive positions within the guerrilla camp. The M72 light anti-tank weapon is an American single-shot disposable launcher. It fires a 66mm high-explosive anti-tank warhead with a 200-meter effective range. The ubiquitous Soviet bomber, the F1 is a fist-sized fragmentation grenade with a 5-meter lethal radius. The F1 can be used either in offensive capacity or rigged with tripwire to supplement camp defenses or early warning plans. The M18 Claymore mine fires 700 steel balls in a 60-degree arc, lethal out to 50 meters. Commonly command detonated, it is a versatile explosive commonly used in ambushing or defensive positions. With little concern about international conventions regarding victim-detonated explosives, the guerrillas are shown utilizing their claymores on a tripwire setting. The Strela 2 or SA-7 Grail is a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile. Supplied by the Russians, the Strela provides a capable anti-aircraft threat to low-flying aircraft. The Russian advisor is shown using a Walther PP, a compact pistol likely carried as much as a status symbol as a tool. Other plausible pistols in use include the Makarov PM and Colt 1911. Vintage 4x4s provide off-road capability, and are likely the primary form of movement in and out of the camp. One such truck can be seen modified into an improvised generator, likely rendered so after becoming unserviceable for driving. The guerrillas have access to a Bell 206 Jet Ranger, potentially a gift from their Soviet benefactors or indicative of a sophisticated revenue stream. The Jet Ranger is likely used to ferry key URNG leaders or VIPs between the various guerrilla camps. Mission. Analyzing the enemy mission involves putting ourselves in their shoes, in an attempt to determine the scope and goals of their future operations. Sound mission analysis therefore requires understanding the commander's intent 1 and 2 levels up from the organization executing the mission. This is true for both enemy and friendly mission analysis. Doing so clarifies the purpose, or why, of the mission and ensures that the tactical task is aligned with higher organizational strategic objectives. In this example, the command level 1-up would be the URNG leadership external to the camp. With the context we've pieced together so far, the 1-up commander's intent is to destabilize Guatemalan military forces within the area of operations through large-scale offensive action in order to degrade the legitimacy of the local government. The command 2 levels up could be considered the regional Russian command, making their intent to advance Soviet geopolitical interests in the Central Americas through proxy insurgencies in order to degrade US influence in the region. These higher-level commanders are focused on the strategic and operational mission respectively, while the actions of the ground commander would be considered the tactical level of war. The enemy tactical mission statement therefore becomes: the jungle camp garrison is to defend its current position in order to support force generation and battle preparation of URNG offensive operations in the border regions. Similar to how the commander's intent changes depending on the level of the mission, the center of gravity may also change relative to the scale of the operation. I cover this in every video, however it's an essential component of military decision making, so it's worth repeating. Center of gravity is defined as the source of power that provides moral or physical strength, freedom of action, or the will to act. Or simply put, it's what gives a force its competitive edge, be it tangible, such as a key vehicle or weapon system, or abstract, such as their ideology. The examples on screen show how the center of gravity changes depending on the associated level of warfare, with these taking into account the nature of the URNG as both a political and militant anti-government organization, and the character of the Cold War conflict in 1980s Central America. This leaves a few potential options for the tactical level center of gravity. One choice is the guerrillas' dismounted mobility and their capacity to easily disperse into the physical and human terrain. Another might be the Russian advisors, who provide expertise and weaponry. Alternately, the helicopter might be considered the center of gravity, as it allows the guerrilla commanders to rapidly egress from the position. However, these may not explicitly support the 1-up commander's intent. Accordingly, the most appropriate center of gravity is the camp defensive perimeter. The defensive perimeter means the guerrillas can gain early warning on approaching enemy, limit access points by infiltrators or saboteurs, and protect the physical infrastructure and assets within the camp. Nailing down the most appropriate enemy center of gravity can sometimes be a highly debatable task, so when in doubt, try to focus on what is the definable strength of the enemy contextual to your mission, as opposed to a strength of the enemy. Critical capabilities. These connected critical capabilities support the center of gravity. The aforementioned bunkers are the foremost tactical dilemma to any attacking force. These hardpoints serve as firing platforms, anchoring the perimeter's defense and allow the guerrillas to concentrate firepower from elevated vantage points. The Soviet-supplied Strela air defense missiles are a strategic asset and prove a lethal threat to helicopters and low-flying fixed-wing aircraft. This anti-aircraft capability prevents aviation assets from conducting aerial surveillance of the camp and stops helicopter assault forces from landing directly on the objective. Small mobile teams of 3 to 5 fighters armed with AKMs patrol the jungle beyond the sentries. These patrols detect or harass approaching enemy before breaking contact to the perimeter. Roving patrols provide situational awareness and buy time for defensive preparation. The perimeter leverages the approaching terrain, narrow trails, thick brush, and natural choke points to channel attackers into engagement areas. The camp also backs onto a river, creating a natural obstacle that limits the direction of approach for attackers. Tripwire claymore mines, F1 grenades, and improvised noisemakers are in place on likely approach routes to sentry and hardpoint positions. These serve to alert defenders to the axis of enemy approach and create casualties within any assaulting force. The camp is well supplied with ample ammunition caches and rations, enabling prolonged defensive firefights without external resupply. This ensures the camp can self-sustain a defensive battle until reinforced. Critical vulnerabilities arise from either intrinsic weaknesses or external factors hindering the deployment of the center of gravity. Identifying these vulnerabilities allow us to develop plans that target the enemy's core strength at the tactical level. The guerrillas' arsenal consists of assault rifles, light machine guns, and light explosives. This leaves the defenders outgunned against more heavily armed attackers with support weapons. These light weapons somewhat negate the inherent defender's advantage, as they cannot effectively suppress and therefore disrupt or halt an enemy's advance. As irregular fighters with only rudimentary training, the guerrillas fundamentally lack basic soldier skills when compared to professional soldiers of a national military force. This vulnerability manifests as poor marksmanship skills, inexperienced junior leaders, and poor battlefield discipline. With no advanced training and zero night vision equipment, the guerrillas are outmatched during periods of darkness by a force trained and confident in night operations. This limits their ability to conduct clearing patrols, in place sentries, and means their defensive posture is degraded by nightfall. The guerrillas' morale, although high, is susceptible to erosion under sustained assault or significant casualties. Their lack of combat experience and training exacerbates this, potentially leading to panic or surrender faster than a professional military force. This undermines the holistic strength of the camp perimeter and may cause a breakdown in defensive resolve. The camp's remote location is accessible only by off-road trails, rotary wing aircraft, and foot patrol. This isolation slows the arrival of reinforcements or supplies and leaves defenders vulnerable to attrition during prolonged combat or being cut off from supporting forces. While being able to shape the battlefield, their anti-aircraft missiles are not without weakness. These systems require the operator to maintain a line of sight on the target in order to achieve a firing solution, and their effectiveness is therefore limited by mountainous terrain, the jungle canopy, and nighttime.
What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils?
Part 2. Friendly Force Analysis. Before developing the friendly battle plan, we need to select a real-world unit that aligns with the lore of the film. As one generally plans a mission with the intention of winning, this force must be appropriately selected to defeat the enemy's center of gravity, either through capabilities, composition, or both. Given the location of the film, a US Army Special Forces team, augmented by Guatemalan Army regulars, is the logical choice relevant to the story's framework. Allow me to explain. Prior to locating the enemy camp, the patrol tracker Billy makes the grisly discovery of mutilated bodies strung up in the trees, whom Dutch identifies as Jim Hopper, a Green Beret out of Fort Bragg. We later learn this team became the first victims of the Predator's tropical safari, having been covertly dispatched by Dillon, the shady CIA agent accompanying the mission. So in honor of Jim Hopper's ill-fated team, we can set about planning the camp raid in a less insane Hollywood fashion, using the elite men of the US Army Special Forces. The friendly force consists of a 12-man US Army Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha, or ODA, specifically from the 1st Battalion 7th Special Forces Group, who focused on Latin America during the period. These SF soldiers, known as Green Berets, specialize in unconventional warfare, direct action, and foreign internal defense, which typically involves training a partner force, or PF, within a foreign nation. The partner force in this case is an infantry company from the Guatemalan Parachute Brigade. These elite infantry are US trained and during the 80s were used as a rapid response counterinsurgency force in the Guatemalan highlands. This structure has parallels to the real US mission to El Salvador in the 1980s, where 7th Group played a key role in training the El Salvador armed forces against a coalition of left-wing, Soviet-backed guerrilla groups. To stay true to the atmosphere of the film, the ODA in Guatemalans will be equipped with period-correct weapons and equipment. This is predominantly a stylistic choice, as while multicam and M4s are wonderful, M16 and Woodland is the peak aesthetic trip, and I refuse to elaborate. A US Army captain leads the 12-man Green Beret team. He is trained in unconventional warfare, cross-cultural coordination, and is responsible for mission planning and liaison with Guatemalan leadership. A Chief Warrant Officer too acts as second in command and is the most experienced soldier in the team. He is a long-running member who ensures continuity in training and operational experience. A Guatemalan major trained in basic infantry tactics commands the partner force. He relies on the ODA for advanced training and operational advice, thereby combining US guidance with tacit knowledge of the local landscape. The Guatemalan company includes 3 lieutenants, each commanding 30 soldiers. They possess limited formal officer training, however have practical experience against insurgents. The combined force integrates the ODA's small specialized team with the larger Guatemalan infantry company, structured as follows. The 12-strong ODA team is the nucleus of the Special Forces Battalion. This team consists of Green Berets specially trained in different roles. A captain is the ODA team leader, a warrant officer is the assistant team leader, an operations sergeant, 2 weapons sergeants, 2 engineer sergeants, 2 medical sergeants, 2 communication sergeants, and an intelligence sergeant. This diverse range of skill sets allow the ODA to operate independently in-country and train their partner force across the full range of soldier skills. The Guatemalan Infantry Company is approximately 100 personnel, typical for a Central American military of the 1980s. Company headquarters contains 5 personnel, the company commander, the 2IC, the CSM, and 2 radio operators. There are 3 rifle platoons, each containing a 3-man PHQ and 3 squads of 9 soldiers. The company is also supported by 1 weapons squad, containing 9 men. The competency of the Guatemalan troops varies, as junior members have likely received only basic rifleman training. However, others have advanced skills courtesy of the ODA and combat experience from previous campaigns against insurgencies. Assets and weapons. The standard rifle for 80s ODA teams, the M16A1 has an effective range of 300 meters and fires from a 30-round magazine, optimized Devised from the jungle experience of Vietnam, the M16A1 is a lightweight and maneuverable rifle, apt for the jungles of Central America. Note that while the broader US Army had adopted the M16A2 by 1987, SF teams opted to retain the A1 variant, often in carbine length, favouring the full auto capability over the A2's 3-round burst setting. Another icon of the Vietnam War, the 7.62mm M60 is a belt-fed, air-cooled general-purpose machine gun. With a 600-metre effective range, the M60's heavy firepower is used by the weapons sergeant for suppressive fire and is able to penetrate the thick underbrush of the jungle, light structures, and vehicles. A 40mm underbarrel attachment for the M16, firing high-explosive, illumination, or smoke rounds out to 350 metres. The M203's low velocity allows it to engage targets in dead ground. A disposable 66mm single-use anti-tank rocket with an effective range of 200 metres. The M72 excels at destroying light vehicles or bunkers. ODA of the era would have likely utilised the AN-PVS-5 NVG, a second-generation night vision binocular goggle. The AN-PVS-5 was a less capable predecessor to the ubiquitous AN-PVS-7, which would be introduced later in 1988. The engineering sergeant is an expert in both conventional and improvised explosives, and as such has access to a suite of explosive charges. These are used for both demolitions or ordnance disposal. A man-portable VHF radio which provides the ODA team a communications lifeline to the rear. Today's SF teams are issued compact digital radios to the man. However, the PRC-77 set is a heavy and cumbersome system and is issued at 1 per platoon. The ODA medical sergeants have advanced training, allowing them to provide life-saving trauma care in the field. Guatemalan Infantry Company assets. Purchased in large numbers from Israel in the 1970s, the Guerrilla family of rifles were commonly used by the Guatemalan Regular Army. It shares ammunition compatibility with the American M16 in the 5.56mm cartridge and was commonly fitted with a 35-round magazine. A Belgian-designed 7.62mm battle rifle, the FN-FAL is issued to squad leaders. Capable of firing semi and full auto, it fires the heavier 7.62mm cartridge, albeit from a smaller 20-round box magazine. While a heavier recoiling rifle, the 7.62mm round offers increased penetration in the thick jungle vegetation. The Belgian Mag-58 is the Guatemalan counterpart to the M60 carried by the ODA. The Mag-58 is deployed by the weapon squad specifically for support by fire tasks. Soviet-designed 40mm rocket propel grenade with 150mm range, the RPG-2 provides a basic anti-vehicle capability to the weapon squads. With inherently limited road access, helicopters are a crucial platform for jungle counterinsurgency operations, providing troop lift, close air support, and casualty evacuation. The Guatemalan Army's helicopter fleet relies heavily on US-donated and civilian-modified airframes to support counterinsurgency operations. The iconic UH-1 Huey of Vietnam fame was donated through US military aid in the 70s, while the Guatemalan government also purchased a fleet of Bell 212 and 412 helicopters in the early 80s. The Huey is capable of lifting 8 to 10 troops, while the Bell carries 13. Mission. Similar to developing the enemy mission, friendly mission analysis allows us to understand the who, what, when, where, but most importantly, the why or purpose of the operation. Doing so ensures we are planning sound courses of action and executing the mission within the higher commander's intent. Detailed mission analysis can be a daunting and complicated process, so for the sake of simplicity, we will focus on 2 key steps: analysing the commander's initial guidance and determining key tasks. In the real world, the commander's initial guidance is received in the form of an operations order, or OPORD. In our example, this information is instead gleaned from the dialogue in the film's opening scene, where both General Phillips and Dillon provide Dutch with a situation report and outline plan. From this verbal briefing, we learn American diplomatic VIPs in a transport helicopter have been shot down by rebels. It's assessed these personnel have since been captured and brought to a guerrilla base camp in the jungle, and a dismounted ground mission is required to locate and clear the camp. The helicopter was shot down 18 hours ago, and a timely recovery operation must be launched in the next 24 hours in order to recover the hostages before they can be moved to another location or executed by their captors. In this way, rescuing the hostages is as much about preserving their lives as it is about sending a message. The mission will demonstrate that harming US forces will be met with swift retribution and that the guerrillas can be targeted no matter where they hide. It also serves to reclaim credibility for the US mission in the region and establishes solidarity between the Guatemalan and American government. A side note on the plot which is mildly absurd. We learn later in the film that much of this briefing was a cover story, simply to get Dutch to agree to the mission, as the hostages were in fact CIA operatives conducting cross-border aerial surveillance. Dillon's true commander's intent was to outright destroy the enemy camp in order to prevent the guerrillas conducting a large-scale cross-border operation. Why Dillon couldn't have simply briefed the true version of events to Dutch is unclear, as despite having moral qualms about being used as, quote, assassins, Dutch would later go on to obliterate the camp anyway, after finding Jim Hopper's corpse and witnessing the hostages being executed.
We're a rescue team, not assassins. Knock, knock. We're a rescue team.
Stick around.
Identify tasks. Another key step in mission analysis is identifying tasks, with the three types being specified, essential, and implied. A specified task is one specifically assigned by a higher commander. An implied task is one that must be performed to accomplish a specified task or mission, but is not explicit in the higher commander's orders. And an essential task is either a specified or implied task that must be executed to accomplish the mission. Essential tasks will later form the backbone of the mission statement. Understanding these definitions, we can now determine our tasks list. Specified tasks. Confirm the guerrilla camp. Dylan's briefing specifically mentions picking up the guerrilla trail at the crash site and tracking them to their base. This suggests the precise location of the camp is currently unknown, and confirming its location is the first task. Recover the hostages. Dylan also explicitly states to retrieve the captured personnel from the guerrilla camp, which also serves as the purpose of the High Commander's intent. Implied tasks. Coordinate with Guatemalan forces. As a joint operation with the Guatemalan partner force, briefing and preparing them for the mission is a key step in the planning process. They must be brought up to speed on the purpose and scheme of maneuver for the mission. Remain uncompromised. Although not explicitly a surveillance mission, the approach to the enemy camp must see the friendly force remain undetected. Being compromised prior to this point risks putting the guerrillas on high alert or gives them time to relocate the hostages to another camp by air or road. Conduct reconnaissance. Time permitting, conducting final reconnaissance prior to any assault will yield useful intelligence on enemy dispositions and is seldom a waste of time or effort. Neutralize camp defenders. Not stated, but necessary. Enemy fighters must be destroyed, captured, or cleared from the objective to enable safe personnel recovery. Site and extraction point. On completion of the clearance, the hostages must be extracted safely back to friendly lines through the most tactically sound means necessary. Essential tasks. Clear the enemy camp. Implied but essential. Without first clearing the camp of enemy combatants, any subsequent hostage recovery efforts are untenable. Recover the hostages. Stemming directly from the stated commander's intent, recovering the hostages is both specified and essential. Mission success hinges on retrieving the friendly personnel alive. Having completed our mission analysis, our mission statement becomes clear. ODA 7111 with Guatemalan partner force is to clear guerrilla camp in AO Hunter no later than D plus 24 hours in order to recover hostages and sustain US and local government credibility within the region. The friendly center of gravity is the joint force's superior training and firepower. This center of gravity acknowledges the collective strengths of both the ODA and the Guatemalan company. This joint force combines the enhanced tactical acumen of the Green Berets with the local knowledge, superior numbers, and support weapons of the Guatemalan infantry. Critical capabilities. Having trained intimately with the ODA, the Guatemalan infantry can tackle more complicated missions than their insurgent adversaries. The platoon leaders can also be given independent tasks, allowing for synchronization of key timings and effects. The ODA M60s combined with the Guatemalan MAG-58s provide a marked firepower advantage over the light arms of the guerrillas. These support weapons can effectively suppress enemy positions, permitting assault forces to advance under covering fire. 7th Special Forces Group has substantial training and jungle expertise from other regional operations. The Guatemalan company also has homegrown advantage in the environment. The ODA's reconnaissance training, paired with the visual tracking knowledge of the Guatemalans, makes them a formidable jungle warfare force, capable of tracking enemy combatants and developing the situation on guerrilla positions while remaining undetected. The Guatemalan army's access to helicopters creates greater flexibility in the tactical plan. This allows the joint force to deploy to suitable landing zones, or conduct rappelling or fast roping, insertion or extraction methods. The ODA medical sergeant's advanced casualty care and trauma kits can sustain both ODA and Guatemalan casualties. This keeps the joint force combat effective prior to and after the assault. Critical vulnerabilities. The rate of advance in the jungle environment is extremely slow due to both the thickness of the vegetation and also the need to patrol at a deliberate pace to detect enemy by sight, sound, or smell. This is compounded by the size of the force, as formations are often restricted to single file. Thick underbrush and vegetation conceals defensive positions, sentries, and early warning devices. A mobile force in the jungle must be on high alert and move with the utmost caution to avoid detection and falling victim to an ambush. The jungle canopy and mountainous terrain can interfere with VHF radio transmissions. This reduces the effective ranges to both external supporting units and also limits the effectiveness of inter-team radio communications. In the jungle, a dismounted force can bring only what they can carry on their backs. Without access to supporting vehicles or resupply through aviation, the assault force faces sustainment challenges regarding ammunition, water, and rations. The camp's remote location leaves the ground force isolated from friendly support. The jungle terrain also hinders the size of friendly reinforcements and delays the arrival time of quick reaction forces. Heat, humidity, and the arduous nature of patrolling in the jungle drains both stamina and morale. Troops fatigue faster, wet and muddy conditions can impact weapons reliability, and alertness levels drop, cumulatively reducing combat effectiveness.
Makes Cambodia look like Kansas.
Part 3. Terrain analysis. Terrain analysis is a broad assessment of the physical operating environment within the mission area of operations. A simple template for assessing and briefing terrain is to use the acronym OCOCA. Consideration should be given to how these factors affect both friendly and enemy forces. The dense jungle canopy surrounding the guerrilla camp severely restricts observation and fields of fire for both defenders and attackers, limiting visibility to 50 to 100 meters due to the thick vegetation and hilly terrain. The elevated bunkers provide marginally better vantage points, extending the observation and weapons range of defenders. Conversely, the steep slopes to the south provide line of sight onto the depth of the camp by outside observers. The jungle vegetation is in this way a double-edged sword, as it serves to conceal the camp from outside prying eyes, but also makes it easier for attackers to approach undetected. The camp's natural concealment, dense trees, vines, and undergrowth, shields it from aerial observation and provides camouflage for sentry positions. Covered fire positions are primarily the bunkers, with the remaining structures offering no cover from direct fire. Natural cover for both attackers and defenders can be found in fallen logs or shallow depressions, with thick trees able to withstand penetration from even 7.62mm rounds. The camp and surrounds contain both natural and man-made obstacles. The jungle itself is innately complex, with vines and roots slowing foot movement, particularly for large formations. The camp backs onto a flowing watercourse, denying approach to both vehicles and dismounts. The camp's large center hut and hostage holding area are the most critical buildings within the camp interior, and physical control of the hostage location offers a strategic advantage to whomever holds it. Other buildings of note include the storage warehouse, barracks, cookhouse, and the Soviet Advisors Annex. Narrow footpads are present throughout the AO surrounding the camp. These allow movement in single-file formation at a faster rate than traversing the jungle, however at greater risk of detection and compromise through sentry observation, enemy patrols, or tripwires and early warning devices. One such track provides entry and exit from the camp to the north, over a narrow footbridge. Outside foot movement, the camp is accessible only by air or by a single light vehicle track, which serves as the primary resupply route for heavy equipment. This road is easily covered by defenders, and any movement can be observed and reported by civilian spotters.
So you cooked up a story and dropped the 6 of us in a meat grinder.
Part 4. The Battle Plan. In previous videos, we discussed the principles of defense. However, as an offensive operation, this mission requires a different planning template. It's also worth mentioning the 3-to-1 ratio. This is a doctrinal tenet popularized prior to World War II, which states an attacking force should outnumber the defending force by at least 3-to-1 to achieve a decisive victory in offensive operations. The 3-to-1 is often cited as a firm rule, but it's really more of a guideline, particularly in modern combat where the defender's advantage can be mitigated by other means. In this case, the guerrillas number some 50 fighters strong, and our assault force of ODA and Guatemalans are just over 100. So although we fall shy of the 3-to-1 ratio, the disparity can be offset by other factors, such as firepower overmatch, terrain, superior training, or technology. With the mission being to recover the hostages, the most fitting tactical action for this task is a raid. A raid differs from a conventional attack in that it is not intended to clear and hold ground, but rather culminates with the pre-planned withdrawal of all friendly forces. The doctrinal definition is an operation to temporarily seize an area in order to secure information, confuse an adversary, capture personnel or equipment, or to destroy a capability. Raids require tight operational security, both in planning and execution, to retain the element of surprise, and are typically a 5-phase mission. Phase 1 is the insertion and/or infiltration to the objective. Phase 2 is the isolation of the target. Phase 3 is the execution of the strike. Phase 4 is securing the target and executing the tactical action. And Phase 5 is the withdrawal. With these phases as a framework, we can develop a concept of operations and brief the scheme of maneuver for the mission. As squads and platoons are often broken into smaller or larger combined formations based on the phase of the mission, it's important to brief groupings and tasks to all mission participants by phases. Examples include splitting a squad to fit in multiple vehicles, or upscaling a fire support position with additional machine guns from a sister platoon. In a perfect world, a mission like this would greatly benefit from a thorough reconnaissance pull prior to launching the raid. This would entail days of prior workup, involving signals intelligence, satellite screens, and on-the-ground recce teams feeding live updates back to the planners. This would clarify many of the above enemy assumptions in the form of fulfilling Commander's Critical Information Requirements, or CCIRs. Additionally, the compressed timeline means the assault force can't conduct detailed rehearsals, an instrumental component of pre-raid training. Unfortunately for us, the film gives Dutch's team less than a day to complete the mission, and our planning process will therefore work within the same timeline. Hello. So before getting into the battle plan, there's something I want to discuss which is slowly driving me insane, and that is the question of which of these borders surrounding Guatemala is the one they cross in the film to conduct the raid. We know from the new canon, which comes from Predators, that Isabel says it's in Guatemala, but it doesn't really help narrow down if they're in Guatemala already and flying into El Salvador, or the other way around, and they're staging in El Salvador and flying into Guatemala, or from Guatemala to Honduras into Belize. No one knows. It's not clear from either of the films. The old canon doesn't help us here either, because Valverde, the map of is also still Guatemala. It's just this annex at the northeast part of the country that borders Mexico and Belize. The filming location of the camp raid is somewhere on the west coast of Mexico. It's at this little tourist resort retreat thing called El Eden. It looks pretty sick. They've got a statue of the Predator and the helicopters and all that sort of kit. But there's also no borders here that can help us ascertain where they're supposed to be or which country they're in. If we try and get cheeky and use the map that we see at the start of the film, this is the one that General Phillips is briefing Dutch on. You can see points here, and it's the cabinet minister alongside the border, all that. This is no help either, because this is Brazil, which you can tell just by Googling this Mangabeira's place, which will bring you to somewhere here in eastern Brazil. And it further doesn't help us ascertain which border it is, because the border that he's pointing to in the movie is not a national border between two Central American countries. It's a state border in Brazil between the state of Piauí and the state of Bahia. Sorry, Brazilians, for the pronunciation. It's a lot of yapping, I know, but long story short is that there's really no way to ascertain with what we currently know which one of these borders is the one they fly across in the film. And therefore, for the purpose of this analysis or this battle plan moving forward, I'm simply going to omit the border crossing from the air mobile operation. Thank you. Phase 1 starts with the raid force departure from the firm base in rotary wing assets before entering the mission airspace. Operational security here is critical, as the guerrillas likely have civilian sympathizers with eyes on the base. Deception can be achieved by taking a non-direct flight path to the insertion point, and also conducting dummy drops en route. Due to the threat posed by the guerrilla anti-aircraft missiles, the insertion point must be offset from both the camp and the crash site. Additionally, the thick jungle vegetation leaves few viable helicopter landing zones, and may require the assault force to rappel into the insertion point. This phase is logistically intense and involves 10 of the Guatemalan Army's 14 available helicopters. Our key groupings for Phase 1 are the airlift chalks. A chalk is a composite force element sized specifically to embark on helicopters. Air mobile operations are inherently complex, and Murphy's Law of Combat states helicopters notoriously fail when they're needed most. Chalks are therefore grouped with redundancy in mind, separating key leadership positions and ODA specialists across the airframes. This ensures the mission can continue on track in the event of an aircraft failure. This payload is achievable with the assault force in light fighting order for a short 12-hour mission, however is on the spicy side of the maximum weight limit for a longer duration mission requiring heavy field packs. Phase 1 ends with the assault force secure at the insertion point, having rendezvoused on the ground in their respective squads and ready to commence the foot patrol. Phase 2 starts with departure from the LZ and ends with the assault force postured ready to commence the attack. This phase has a few moving parts and as such is broken into further stages. Stage 1 is locating the crash site and establishing an assembly area. Stage 2 is close target reconnaissance of the campsite, designated Objective Blaine. Stage 3 sees the remainder of the task force move to and occupy these positions, postured to execute. Groupings and tasks Phase 2. The reconnaissance party consists of 4 ODA and 4 Guatemalan scouts. On departure from the insertion point, the recce party will lead the company to the crash site and establish Assembly Area Billy. Once the assembly area is set, they will patrol to the enemy camp and confirm defensive positions, the location of the hostages, and site the friendly blocking, SPF, and assault FUP positions. On completion of this task, the recce party will return to the company assembly area and then ground guide the main body into their respective pre-assault positions. Their secondary task is to identify, mark, or disable early warning devices encountered on approach to the camp. The assembly area contains all remaining personnel not involved in the reconnaissance. The assembly area is to adopt all-round security, establish communications with HQ, and be prepared to support the recce party in the event of hard compromise. The blocking force consists of the Guatemalan 1st Platoon and 2 ODA advisors, occupying blocking position Dutch, which covers the main ground route into the camp. Once established, this will act as early warning on enemy vehicle approach using the main track. Support by fire MAC is manned by the Guatemalan 2nd Platoon, the weapon squad, and 2 ODA advisors. The SPF is to occupy their positions south of the camp and lay their guns onto the key enemy positions and bunkers, ready for the initiation. The assault group consists of the Guatemalan 3rd Platoon and the remaining 8 ODA members. The assault group will occupy the pre-sighted attack position Poncho to the west of the camp and remain postured until the initiation. Phase 3 sees the commencement of offensive action and starts with the initiation of fire from SBF MAC and ends with the hostage location secured by the assault group. During a raid, the focus is on violence of action, surprise, and firepower to maximize the shock effect to the defenders. Rapidly overwhelming the enemy on the objective in this way prevents them from enacting an orderly defense and also allows assaulters to breach the defensive perimeters during the chaos of the engagement. As the assaulters advance, the SPF position will suppress enemy gun emplacements and destroy enemy personnel posing a threat to the lives of the hostages. Phase 4 is the physical recovery of the hostages, and begins with the assault force reaching the hostage building and ends with the entire objective secured. Once the hostages are in the custody of the assaulters, the few remaining threats or structures can be cleared in a more cautious manner. Priority from here is to establish a perimeter around the camp and prevent a guerrilla counterattack from either dismounted or mounted avenues of approach. Note, as this particular objective is relatively small, there's not much detail to the breaching and recovery component of Phase 4, as the hostages are likely in a small hut or concrete structure. On a larger objective, Phase 4 of a raid might include clearing a substantial building that had previously been isolated and surrounded during Phase 3. Phase 5 is the withdrawal from the objective. It starts once Objective Lane has been secured and ends with the entire raid force plus hostages safe back at the friendly base. With the threat of anti-aircraft missiles nullified, Phase 5 will see a helicopter extraction directly from the objective. Such a helicopter extraction was not tactically viable in the film, as Dutch's small team lacked the numbers to physically hold the objective and faced an imminent guerrilla counterattack. Our more appropriately sized company task force, however, has no such issues. Coordinating instructions are briefed after the scheme of maneuver is explained. This information provides the mission participants with key timings, boundaries, and contingency elements of the plan. Key triggers. As the jungle makes communication and therefore synchronization between teams difficult, a time-based trigger will serve as the initiation for the attack. HL for the assault is set for 0600 hours, meaning it is imperative all elements are ready in their respective positions prior to this time. Other generic options for initiating an assault include signal flares, the SBF engaging, or by radio. Sticking with the film's timeline, the orders are received on the afternoon of day -1, and the hostages are to be secured within 24 hours. As mentioned, this leaves no time for preliminary shaping operations, and hence why the plan sees the insertion conducted in one lift to pre-stage the assault force in the AO. Our mission timeline therefore becomes 1800 hours the day of receiving the mission. The helicopter assault force departs the main base for AO Hopper. By 2000 hours, insertion to be complete with all personnel reconsolidated on the ground. 2200 hours, the crash site is secured and the assembly area occupied by the main body, giving the recce team 5 hours to confirm the objective and sight the blocking, SBF, and attack position. No later than 0545 hours, the entire raid force must have occupied their ready positions, postured for initiation of the attack at first light H-hour 0600 hours on D-Day. This timeline is actually insanely tight, however is necessary to launch a first light raid. This dawn attack catches the guerrillas unprepared and aligns with the partner force's liabilities, being no night vision and minimal night training. Conversely, if we delay the timeline and launch a daytime assault, it comes with greater risk of compromise by the clearing patrols, sentries, and a generally more awake and alert camp. In reality, this task would require an exceptionally well-drilled and tightly rehearsed unit to be able to meet these timings by night in the complex terrain of the jungle, so we'll have to rely on a bit of plot armor and assume the ODA and Guatemalans are an uber-cohesive joint team with extensive experience working together.
Payback time.
Part 5. Battle Simulation. We will kick off with the preliminary phases complete, and the raid force postured and ready for initiation. At this pre-dawn hour, the majority of the guerrillas are either still asleep in the barracks or manning the bunkers. The only enemy roaming about are either relieving themselves, swapping out sentries, or chasing an early morning snack from the cookhouse. As a refresher, we have 1st Platoon holding the blocking position, 2nd Platoon plus Weapon Squad in the SBF, and 3rd Platoon in the forming up point, each with their complement of accompanying ODA advisors. At 0600 hours, the initiation of fire from the SBF marks the start of the attack. Engaging with a rapid rate of machine gun fire from the MAG-58s and M60s creates the much-needed violence of action and provides an unpleasantly shocking wakey-wakey for the sleeping guerrilla camp. Any rebels not shielded by the protection of the bunkers are cut down, with the exposed camp offering little cover to the lightly armed guerrillas. The bunkers can also be targeted by rockets and 40mm grenades, further suppressing the hardened positions and reducing their ability to return fire. The SBF position must be tightly controlled to ensure that high explosives are used only on positions removed from the hostage location. The ODA sharpshooters in the SBF focus their fire on enemy personnel in vicinity of the hostages, using disciplined, accurate fire to prevent enemy personnel executing the hostages. They are also targeting the Soviet advisors and other identified key leaders, in particular, preventing their escape using the enemy helicopter. As the SBF saturates the guerrilla hardpoints with fire, the assault force steps off from their FUP and commences their approach to the western side of the camp. As they make entry to the camp perimeter, they utilize smoke grenades to both obscure themselves from enemy fire and also indicate the forward line of their position. This triggers the SBF to switch fire to prevent fratricide and begin targeting guerrillas in depth or further to the east. Having reached the storage shed, the enemy have by now awakened from their slumber and are either attempting to reinforce other buildings or flee. Speed is essential, as the assault force must reach the hostage location before they can be harmed. To achieve this, the 8-man ODA takes point, dynamically clearing the camp as the Guatemalan squads peel away to clear and secure the buildings as they pass. In the close confines of the buildings, the superior CQB training of the ODA easily neutralize any guerrillas attempting to stand and fight. And with the ongoing machine gun fire support of the SBF, more guerrillas are destroyed on being caught in the open. As a Guatemalan squad clears the main hut, the lead ODA breaching team make entry and secure the hostage shed under cover of the SBF. With the hostage in their control, the ODA reconsolidated the cookhouse, allowing the rear Guatemalan squad to leapfrog to the point. Under heavy effective fire, the eastern bunkers offer little resistance, and the guerrillas can do little but blind fire over the sandbag walls as 7.62 from the MAG-58s and M60s tear into their position. Deciding that discretion is the better part of valor, many remaining guerrillas elect to escape using the footbridge to the north. Noting that the mission is to clear the camp and not to outright destroy all personnel, withdrawing enemy are not inherently problematic to the mission. However, a counterattack is, and the Guatemalan infantry from the previously cleared buildings should provide cut-off fire onto this egress route. Similarly, the blocking position on the road can provide cut-off onto guerrillas withdrawing to the west, preventing them too from reconsolidating outside the camp and launching a counterattack. With the hostages now recovered by the ODA breach team, there is less urgency to the clearance, and the remainder of the camp can be cleared by the Guatemalan platoon at a more deliberate pace. By now, the leftover guerrillas have likely decided that the life of a socialist fanatic is not for them, and either throw down their arms and flee into the jungle or choose to offer up a surrender flag. Once the guerrilla prisoners have been secured, the assault force adopts hasty security positions, covering the northern approach for any potential counterattack. With security established, the SPF position can collapse into the objective and supplement the all-round protection of the camp. In preparation for extraction, the isolation force can also be called in, maintaining their block on the road into the camp, however from closer to the perimeter. This is where the ODA demolition specialists earn their cashies, as the objective must be prepared for a helicopter extraction. Using their charges, a landing zone can be blasted into the jungle, opening up a clearing capable of supporting multiple aircraft at a time. Having radioed through the code word for mission completion, the raid force can prepare their withdrawal, adopting chalks ready for helo extraction. The sequence of departure is the hostages, accompanied by the ODA medics first, followed by the remainder of the assault force, then the SBF, and finally, the blocking force, having held their position until the last safe moment to prevent guerrilla reinforcements from arriving using the western road. With the hostages being the mission, the guerrilla prisoners can simply be left at the objective or backloaded for interrogation. But as the Guatemalan army of the time was admittedly a little wobbly with the concept of human rights, the guerrillas would undoubtedly not be too keen on boarding the helicopters anyway. Setting down in waves of 3, all 10 airframes cycle through the landing zone and embark their respective chalks, plus the very relieved hostages, in preparation for the flight home. Everything having gone smoothly, the entire raid force should be airborne by midday, en route back to the US base, and arriving back in time for beer and Guatemalan tacos. But what about the Predator, I hear you lament? A fair question, with no easy answers. Primarily because planning how to defeat a 2-meter tall extraterrestrial with an array of high-tech weapons is not something commonly taught during the strategic theory component of military promotion courses. Further to this, I think our muscle-bound heroes from the movie actually do a decent job of tackling this threat and showing them evolving their strategies as they learn more about the capabilities of the Predator is arguably the most realistic part of the film. Let's recap. They're on a standard Rims raid to vanquish foes of the US government in the jungle, a mission they've done dozens of times before. Suddenly, their radio man Hawkins is eviscerated into a pile of gore by an unseen and unheard assailant, which is confronting enough as it is, but further exacerbated by their rebel detainee Anna rambling about demons and lizards and that the jungle came alive and took him. "We can't have this," says Dutch, and does what any commander would do, and dispatches a clearing patrol during which Blaine, the resident patrol heavy, is also annihilated by a projectile seemingly beyond human technological capacity, leading to their first lesson learned. No more separating its individuals, sticking together is essential for survival. To achieve this, they site a defensive position on high ground and in place every early warning explosive and trip flare they have. This is working a treat until night falls and the Predator daintily defies the tripwires and enters the position undetected to poach Blaine's corpse, leading to lesson learned number 2. The assailant is killing them for the thrill of the hunt, and number 3, he can also detect their early warning systems. The next morning, Anna, having been persuaded into speaking by Dutch, reveals she found the Predator's blood shortly after the previous day's mad minute, giving the team confidence that the creature is meat and bones, and anything meat and bones is vulnerable to the weapons of man. With this information, they establish a new plan to construct a booby trap made of vines and natural vegetation, canalized by claymores and conventional tripwires. This is somewhat effective, and although requiring Dutch to act as the proverbial cheese, the Predator falls for the ruse, and triggers the improvised net trap which sends him screeching towards the canopy. In one of the few smooth-brained moments of the film, our protagonists jump up and gawk skywards instead of giving the net a mag dump, giving the Predator time to fire his plasma caster and escape the trap. From here, Mac, Dylan, Billy, and Poncho are gruesomely dispatched in short order, and the final act of the film sees Dutch free soloing the Predator, with the additional knowledge that his adversary only hunts armed prey. After falling in a creek and getting all sticky and yucky on the riverbank, Dutch also learns that cold mud provides effective concealment from the beast. Using a combination of this camouflage and natural booby traps, Dutch finally manages to vanquish the Predator by crushing him with a deadfall trap, albeit after a hard-fought hand-to-hand battle that demonstrates the Predator's superior physicality to the human form. It's important to mention all this because we can't blueprint a mission to destroy the Predator if we know absolutely nothing about the Predator. Any planning has to be done with the aforementioned knowledge from the film. Without this, we're doing nothing but speculating on how any given unit would react to an intergalactic trophy hunter. With that caveat in place, let's explore how he might handle the tactical dilemma that is what the locals call El que hace trofeos de los hombres, or the demon who makes trophies of man. Enemy analysis. Predator's mission is to hunt dangerous game, which he excels at by being a literally invisible 7-foot-tall alien with super strength and speed. He also has an array of energy and kinetic ranged weapons, complete with smart targeting sensors that allow him to destroy prey from a distance. Failing that, sci-fi grade steel blades are a fixture of his unarmed combat prowess, also making him lethal at melee distances. Despite his dirty bulk, the Predator seemingly has the athleticism of a gibbon and is able to traverse the jungle exclusively using the trees and canopy, providing superior mobility to humans. He's also afforded a degree of protection from gunfire, as although shown bleeding, his species can sponge bullet damage more effectively than mankind. But it's not all doom and gloom. Big chap's size make him a delightfully easy target, as it's logically easier to place effective fire onto something the size of a grizzly bear than a human. His primary projectile weapon also has a distinct blast signature and tracer effect, which reveals his firing position even when fully cloaked. Although nimble, his footfall still leaves ground sign, particularly in wet or muddy terrain, and being caught in the open such as large clearings leave him with less vertical escape routes and open to targeting. Despite being able to tank rifle rounds, large caliber, or a heavy volume of sustained fire is still lethal. Finally, the Predator's motivation to kill being the honor of the hunt means he assesses risk and makes decisions in a fundamentally different mindset to a military force, making him vulnerable to baited traps or decoys. Battle plan. Working with this knowledge, we can combine a few tactical options for attempting to destroy the Predator, none of them particularly enticing for those involved, but there's scant few scenarios where our friendly force comes out of this unscathed. In broad strokes, the plan involves taking a leaf from the Home Alone playbook, adopting a defensive posture, inviting the Predator to enter ground of our choosing, baiting him into traps and kill zones, and positioning him for targeting by massed small arms fire. This plan commences on completion of the camp raid, and instead of extracting from the objective, the ODA and Guatemalan infantry remain in place to begin developing the position. The preliminary task is to reorganize back into standard platoons, leaving the ODA as a separate element. Step 1 will see 1st Platoon reconsolidate the perimeter to reshape the security plan for the new threat. This means lone sentries are a no-go, and hardpoints and static positions must be manned by a fire team at minimum. Bolstering the positions in this way deters the Predator from picking up an easy kill on a lonely or isolated trooper. This also means adopting the army buddy system so you don't get picked off while doing a poo by yourself. Next, 2nd Platoon will get the undesirable task of digging a fighting trench. Using shovels liberated from the now deceased guerrillas, they will dig a slit trench in the center of the camp clearing. This pit will be covered with a lattice of vines and leaf litter, natural camouflage that should prevent its detection by the Predator's thermal sensors. 2nd Platoon's other task is to dig a network of billy hides around the clearing. These are shallow trenches that allow ambushes to hide below ground and can provide a degree of thermal cloaking if sufficiently covered with material or natural vegetation. This strategy was proven to be effective in the latest entry in the franchise, Prey, where French trappers were shown avoiding the thermal vision of the Predator by using this method. These positions will be dug in an L-shaped ambush surrounding the concealed slit trench and oriented facing the south and west. Next will come the phase nicknamed Trap City. Supervised by the ODA, this will see 3rd Platoon revisit their Boy Scout training and constructing a row of deadfall, spear, and bear pit traps on the jungle perimeter to the west of the camp. The southern and eastern jungle perimeter will be lined with claymores, trip flares, and even decoy tripwires in an attempt to coax the Predator into the natural booby traps on the western approach. Assuming the camp raid concluded mid-morning, these tasks will likely take the remainder of the day, and just prior to nightfall, the final step of this plan is to set the bait. This will see 2nd and 3rd Platoons collapse into a tight perimeter and the ODA radio for a helicopter extraction. Next, 1st Platoon will conduct a suspended extraction withdrawal from the objective. This is primarily down to the limited space available within the camp, and that sticking the leftover platoon in the buildings or jungle overnight leaves them recklessly exposed to being picked off at will. While 1st Platoon is being extracted, 3rd Platoon, the ODA, and all but one squad from 2nd Platoon will occupy the belly hides and settle in for an utterly miserable night sweating under a blanket in the jungle. Having been returned to the US base by air, 1st Platoon will remain on high readiness and serve as a QRF and recovery force. Lucky them. The extraction of first platoon from the objective aims to deceive the predator into thinking the bulk of the force has departed the location, and on his return to the camp later that evening, he is greeted by the sight of a small juicy element ripe for the plucking in the form of the final squad of second platoon. If we were more unscrupulous, an alternative plan would be to use the guerrilla prisoners as the bait. However, there is the off chance the predator would view them as unworthy prey, having just watched them lose their defensive battle. This plan admittedly hinges on the assumption that the predator isn't perched in a tree eating space popcorn watching this entire sequence of events, no doubt Billy chuckling under his breath the entire time. But they seemingly get away with it in the films while the predator is busy polishing skulls elsewhere, so I'm electing to grant our guys the same lenience. Once the trap is set, the bait squad is co-located in the centre of the clearing, immediately next to the concealed trench, and as night falls, are feigning an undisciplined crew, sitting around a campfire and generally chilling out with minimum security. This tempts the predator into collecting a few easy spines and also aids in disrupting his thermal sensor. On nightfall, and drawn by the commotion of the helicopter extraction, Old Long, Tall and Ugly will make his return to the campsite, hopefully arriving in time to witness 1st platoon being withdrawn, but not early enough to see 2nd and 3rd platoon slither into their belly hides. Much like a lion stalking gazelle at the watering hole, the predator would find a lone and complacent squad by the fire quite irresistible and gain the confidence to enter the camp. On approach, there's the slim possibility he triggers one of the deadfall traps, having seen the wall of tripwires and deciding to enter the camp through the west. In this case, great success, and the bait squad can quickly reorientate into a baseline and engage the wounded beast before he can escape. It's important they close with his position quickly to prevent him triggering the OP martyrdom perk, whereby they can deliver the coup de grace by way of point-blank 7.62mm headshot, or attempt to restrain him for recovery in the hopes of catching some sweet Weyland-Yutani cash. But I do think it's far more likely a cunning hunter bypasses both the tripwires and natural traps and manages to enter the camp undetected. In this case, I don't see too many scenarios where the bait squad makes it through this alive, with the predator certainly making an easy kill or two on the low end. In this situation, it's highly likely the predator's presence won't be realised until he stalked up to the fireplace and wrist-bladed one of the bait squad members. This close-range attack is a trigger for the ambush initiation, and any bait squad members not already murdered can roll into the previously camouflaged trench to lay low under the barrage of fire. With the predator preoccupied disemboweling the bait squad, the belly hide positions can throw back their covers and begin engaging. At close distance, caught in the open, and without the cover of jungle vegetation, the combined firepower of 2 platoons worth of pre-sighted rifle and machine gun fire would prove too much, and the predator falls defeated in the ambush. As always, thank you for the gift of your time.